And we're off. Actually, we're on. Hello, everybody. It's time for... Oh, gosh. I think I gave a shout out on the last podcast. I think I gave a shout out on the last Manly Monday about Kroger brand matches. I am retracting my endorsement for lots of reasons. This striker is the worst. Like, I could go out and invest in at least $1 more expensive, more productive Matchbox. But nonetheless, this is Manly Monday. What's up, everybody? My name is Tom. You know, it just may not be meant to be today. My name is Tom. I am the co-founder and editor of Your Other Brothers, navigating faith, homosexuality, and masculinity together. And I'm glad you're here. This is Manly Monday, our monthly tradition, where we dive into some scripture and I share some stories from my life relating to these areas of faith, sexuality, and masculinity. So I recently saw a play, you guys. I know, I'm like so cultured. I love seeing plays. I don't see nearly enough of them, but I actually saw a play over the holidays, and it was a play about Jesus, basically his life of ministry, from assembling the disciples to his crucifixion and resurrection. And it was an extremely well done play. You know, there are tons of knocks on Christianity and Christian art. There's so much cheesy Christian art out there, honest Christian attempts to portray either biblical stories or otherwise. But I will say this particular production was top-notch, well done. The sets were amazing. There were live animals. It was crazy. It was so good. But something that I really latched onto in that particular play, which ties into this video, fittingly, it would not really make sense if it didn't fit into this video at all. But it was the story of Jesus and his connections with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. This family that kind of shows up throughout the Gospels, and they're not like super present, they're not like in every single chapter, in every single story. You don't see them following Jesus around like the 12 disciples everywhere that he went. But I think the production did a great job of capturing the fact that clearly, based on the story I'm about to read today, clearly this family meant a lot to Jesus. So clearly they spent a lot of time together. And clearly it was a pretty big deal. The story of Lazarus has always been one of my favorites throughout Scripture, and I don't know that I necessarily fully understood why until seeing this play and getting a whole new perspective on the Jesus-Lazarus relationship and that one verse that we all think about when we think about the Jesus-Lazarus story. We're going to get to that very soon. In John 11, a lot of us know the story, but for those that don't, Jesus and his disciples are away in another city when they catch word that Lazarus is sick, that he's very sick, and that people want him to go to him now, yesterday. Like, let's go and let's do something. Because I'm sure somewhere in the back of their minds, the disciples must have been like, well, he's healed all these other people. He could probably heal Lazarus too, right? Should we not be there? So nonetheless, Jesus delays the trip, says that I'll get there when I get there. And after he gets there, Mary and Martha are hysterical. Not like ha 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 hysterical. They're in hysterics. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Because their brother's died. He died a few days ago, and they're upset, understandably so. Where were you, Jesus? Why weren't you here when this awful thing happened? Probably with that subtext of you could have done something. This could have been prevented. In fact, Mary says the following. John 11:32. Then when Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. She flat out says it, like, if you were here, wouldn't have died, period. Moving on to verse 33. Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. And then verse 35. Jesus wept. And the story, of course, goes on from there. There's an amazing miracle that happens, and there's a whole fallout reaction to that. But I just want to stop right there with that verse that, at least for me anyway, and I feel like for a lot of Christian kids, it was like the first verse we memorized growing up, even more than John 3:16 or some other common scripture. The shortest verse in the Bible, John 11:35, Jesus wept. It used to be a fact For me, it used to just be like, oh yeah, I know that verse, it's only 2 words long. But it has so much weight, and especially after seeing this play and pondering after 3 decades of life and life lived in community and in relationship and friendship with other people, feeling more of a weight. The fact that Jesus would weep and in the presence of other people. I mean, there's no shortage of people with eyeballs watching him and seeing how he reacts, and that he allows himself to weep with all of his friends, all of his followers who are also weeping over this incredibly tragic and sad moment. Like, that is so powerful to me. As a man living in today's America, there's a lot of talk about toxic masculinity and like stereotypes and macho this and macho that, but the fact that Jesus gave himself this permission to weep with people who are weeping and to let those tears fall gives me so much assurance as someone who follows this person. There's a lot of things you can point to that shows Jesus as a man's man, similar to David. You can point to David as the guy who killed the bear and the lion to rescue the sheep, the guy who killed his tens of thousands in battle, but also a man who cried and wept with a friend and wrote poetry and cried out to God and danced for God. There's a lot of other sides to manliness as well. I think about my life, and I'm definitely a crier. I say that unashamedly, unreservedly. I am a crier. I have cried over the death of a dog. I have cried over the death of a car. And that might sound silly. It kind of does sound silly to me too. Like, I'm not so removed from reality to think that that's not a little bit silly. The fact that I personified a car, that I took adventures all over the country, including a 9-month road trip around the continent. One of the most life-changing experiences of my life, and essentially like my friend throughout that year, that long year of living on the road. Like, yeah, I wept like a little baby when I dropped off the car at the junkyard because it couldn't go any further. And it was one of the darkest days of my life because all of a sudden, like, logistically, yes, now I'm without a car, I can't travel anymore, I'm a little bit stranded. There's a lot of like logistical shock that comes with that. But way more than that, it was the emotional disconnect. Like, this car that I've had for something like 10 years, I think, 10 or 11 years. This like faithful companion all over the country is no more. And I remember weeping bitterly when that happened. Certainly when my dog died as a 19-year-old, this dog that had much more than a car been a really soothing comfort to a lonely little kid like me who had just moved 800 miles away, had no friends, really struggled to get out of my comfort zone and step out of my shell with other people. This little dog was always excited to see me. And it was tough when she passed away really unexpectedly and tragically. I cried and I was in disbelief for days and weeks in the aftermath. And I used to feel a lot of shame, and to be honest, even articulating them out loud right now, I feel some shame when I think about where today's masculinity is. Like, where does this put me in the context of men all around the country today, especially in the church? Like, as someone who cries, as someone who's sensitive, is that okay? Do I need to just man up? Do I need to get over it? Do I need to stop crying? And stories like this with Jesus, even fully knowing, like, that's the other aspect of this story, even fully knowing that he's about to do this greatest miracle that he has ever done to this point, raise somebody from the dead. He knows that that's coming. He knows that all these tears are gonna just melt away in a matter of minutes, in a matter of seconds. And he still is taking the time to weep, to allow himself to feel his emotions and also to allow others to witness him feeling those emotions and that connection with them. That speaks volumes to me, and I hope it speaks volumes to you too, that if you're a man, if you're a part of this community, you're more than likely on the sensitive side, on the more sensitive side of things. Not everybody. We certainly have our exceptions, but I know this community tends to draw a lot of sensitive men, emotional men who maybe you don't necessarily enjoy crying. I kind of enjoy crying, if I'm being honest. Maybe you don't enjoy crying, but you cry nonetheless. The Lazarus Jesus story gives me hope that it's okay to cry. It's okay for all men to cry. So I want to hear from you guys. Do you guys cry? What was the last thing you cried about? I'm really curious. I want us to get really vulnerable in this video. What was the last thing you cried about? Or if you want to be so bold, the last thing you wept about? whether it's the loss of a loved one or yeah, just any kind of difficult situation in your life. I love this to be a time where we can share our most vulnerable moments with each other and just assure one another it's okay. It's okay to be sensitive. It's okay to cry because Jesus did. Leave us a comment at yourotherbrothers.com/video, or if you're on YouTube watching, YobTube as I like to call it, leave us a comment under the video. Tell us what you think. If you enjoyed this video, you want to continue to support Your Other Brothers, give it a like, a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to never miss a video that we put out, whether it's a Manly Monday or otherwise. I love you guys. If you're going through a hard time, hang in there. I'm right there with you in a lot of ways right now. As we head out, speak meekly with one another, chase madly after God, and be manly everywhere in between.